Hey guys, thanks for joining today. Nate Dodson, Crowdfunding Lawyers. Today we're going to talk about a really interesting subject, and that's really how to acquire businesses that are scalable through acquiring other businesses. I call it the roll-up strategy. There's multiple ways to approach it, but at the end of the day, the boomer generation is retiring. They have trillions of dollars in profits from their small businesses that they've owned and operated for decades that, frankly, they need to do something with it. And that something is generally sell it if they do not have kids that want to take it over. But let's be honest, that doesn't really happen anymore. So there are business acquisitions that are available now in amounts and levels that is never accomplished before. So I'm going to dive into this roll-up strategy and how you can plan to, frankly, at the end of the day, become your own billionaire. So it is possible. Guess what? Some of the major companies have done that, creating some of the most valuable brands in the entire world. Now, you'll have to accept my apologies. I know this was supposed to be a live, but I'm sick as a dog. So we are going to just play this video. However, I'm hanging out in chat. You just don't want to see me, especially as I have tissues all over the place. So my apologies for not actually being live. However, don't worry, I am here, and this is my motto for the day.
Relax, calm down now. Don't stress. Take it easy.
And that's how I'm going to make my way through it. So without further ado, let's dive into, let's roll up businesses, acquire businesses, and become multimillionaires along the same path. And I will be honest, I'm doing the exact same thing. My goal is to create a massive platform for you to raise capital. And that takes marketing, portals, legal, accounting, all of which have acquired, looking to acquire, pursuing, so that at the end of the day, it is all together with a singular purpose of helping you raise more capital, more efficiently, and more, guaranteed. Because there is risk in raising capital. So I never pretend like there isn't. You got to make sure that you do it the right way, the compliant way. And you just got to make sure you're doing this right every step along the way. And that's where Crowdfunding Lawyers, we are your first stop at making sure that you're doing things compliantly and legally. So anytime, you can always reach out at crowdfundinglawyers.net. We give free consultations. After this, like I said, I'm chatting with you right now. I just don't happen to be able to present live. But let's dive in a little bit while we talk about buying businesses and roll-up strategies. As always, hey, this is just kind of FYI information for your education. It ain't legal advice. I'm not your attorney unless I am your attorney. But if you're going to buy a business, if you're going to pursue investments, investors, either way, make sure that you always have good, competent legal counsel along the way. And like I said, drop your questions in chat. I am actually here live. But man, I just can't do it today. It's painful. With that, let's carry on, where we're going to talk about roll-up opportunities and how to actually make it happen. What we're going to talk about is why. And there's multiple approaches of how to do it. Now let's talk about what buying a business actually looks like and where money came from. And I can be honest, like I said, this is a business strategy that I'm pursuing myself. Just this week, I acquired a investor attraction academy that is there to help coach, to do with you, not a marketing agency, not a do-it-yourself, but here to help you find new investors. So I'm not just teaching, sharing, educating. I am living this as well. And if you didn't know, used to be syndicators and everything else. So I'm right along with the ride, just with you. But now when we talk about why is this actually an opportunity? And the fact is as your business grows, it's actually worth more. This is $1 billion business buying because it actually is possible. Almost every billionaire has made it happen through exactly these strategies. The one outlier is Elon Musk, because let's be honest, he starts everything from scratch. I don't know other acquisitions he's actually doing other than actually buying Tesla itself. But that is all part of this business buying process. And I don't know if you didn't know, actually, Elon Musk did not start Tesla. He bought it. But now with this roll up, with your business of growing, scaling, strategically acquiring, the reason is, as I was saying, the bigger the business, the bigger the value. And let me explain more. If you have a owner run business, all small businesses start this way. Whether it's a solopreneur or they've got their team, guess what? If they're working in the business, their business is only worth generally 2.4 to 3% or 3 times what the net profit is. Now, you can find opportunities that are less costly. Additionally, there are areas of businesses that are more costly, like a physician's office. But on average, this 2.4 to 3 times earnings is a great place to start. And you know what? You're buying a job. You're getting in there to work the system just like everybody else is. But your real goal is to scale. Now, if you're able to bring in professional management, you start creating more of that mailbox money that you can be more hands off. All of a sudden, the value of that business can double. We're talking 4x to 6, 7x. What the earnings are actually becomes a new value because you're being able to sell private company, still not worth as much as a public company, but it is actually creating that mailbox money that frankly, we all should be seeking to attain. But then there's the next strategy. As you continue to grow and continue to scale your business, now it does have to grow pretty large. We're talking about you're making at least $1 million in revenues of at least $10 million. Now you become a target for private equity. And private equity is actually paying more than anybody else to buy the business. Why would they want to pay more for your business? Because their goal is to go from that 10x, 12x value to taking your company public. Now, on average, NASDAQ is for operating cash cows. The price to earnings multiple is about 19x. There are other businesses that are 100x the actual earnings, if not more. Here's where the true become that billionaire, that multi-millionaire. It can happen. You do have to scale a big business. Scaling can actually come from acquisitions. Now let's talk about Jeff Bezos, one of the richest guys in America. Before Amazon, he was actually an investment banker, no different than you, doing his analysis, finding the opportunities, creating investments. He acquired Amazon as a online book vendor back in '94. Now, this was a dot-com stage, and companies were going public based on a business plan, not a whole lot happening. But the value of these internet bubbles was astronomical. One of those times that The professionals were saying throw out the rules of the old business valuation. Bezos started at about that time with his first acquisition being Book Pages. Guess what? This Book Pages business related to his online book sales. I call this vertically integrated business. The ability to buy other businesses that complement your primary purpose. To use myself as an example, I would call it vertically integrated because I'm trying to buy other businesses that relate to my singular goal of helping you raise more capital. It's also the Bezos model with Amazon. And you know what? They've continued to scale. They've continued to grow. Now they're not a book vendor. They are the biggest vendor of absolutely everything in the entire world. They are a great logistics company that they actually got those capabilities from the acquisition of Zappos. And they've continued to grow with the latest data I have was from 2023, but there was their 116th acquisition. They have been growing by doing a roll-up, buying businesses that relate to what their ultimate purpose is. And now there's a different way to do it. I call them the horizontally integrated business. With that, you're buying different brands, different opportunities that may be geographically different. Like if you have a construction company is very localized. Well, if you're buying construction companies in Texas, Florida, California, they can all be named something different. They all can operate same but different. But at the end of the day, they're just geographically different. So it's more of a horizontal integration. Now, if you have that same construction company, but now it's buying a roofer, a plumbing company, an HVAC company, all within the same market, that's where we start talking about more that Bezos model of growing the business. Now, I'll use this example, the Yum Brands. Yum Brands, it was actually a fast food operator. While it started under PepsiCo, another brand buying business, it spun off in the 90s, but even today, it is operating different brands. A lot of franchises where they both own locations as well as franchise to others' locations. And today they're operating KFC, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, the Habit Burger. I don't actually know where that is. However, 43,000 different locations between all of their brands. They're buying different brands, different product lines, all within the restaurant space, but sometimes they're doing it through franchise acquisitions, or they're just opening up their own business locations. And just to speak on franchises real quick, I'm a fan of franchises. It is different than a securities offering. However, it is a strategy to grow and build your business geographically, where you can have different stores opening up. And guess what? For those are paid for and run by franchisee that have a vested interest in seeing the success of that location. It is not a securities offering. With Crowdfunding Lawyers, we teach a lot about what securities offerings are, but the classic test being you're really raising capital from passive investors that are looking for profits. With franchisees, they are active investors. They are actively operating. So it doesn't fall under the same rules and regulations as a securities offering. Now, what makes the most sense, whether you do a vertically integrated roll-up strategy or a horizontal integrated roll-up strategy, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, you are building a business. It really just depends on what is your passion and what is your goal. Hopefully you find your ikigai, where what you love to do, where you're where people will pay you what the world needs and what you're proficient at. It's called your ikigai, and that's really where to focus your roll up. But how deep do you really want to go with this, and what are your goals? Because one option is like the boomers. Maybe you're building your business so that you can hand it off to your kids, your grandkids. Or is what your goal really to be is to build a business to a reasonable scale and then try to sell it to private equity. Great way to have more of a limited time with a specific goal that if you're doing it through a business acquisition strategy, you're buying businesses at 3 times earnings and selling them at 10 to 12 plus times earnings. And that's ignoring the business growth that any skilled entrepreneur should be able to build along the way. Now, if you want to be that billionaire worth $100 million or more, the uber wealthy, now you really have to focus on going public at the end of the day. 100%, it just comes down to how big of a business is it? Do you meet that at least making $15 million in profit? And you can accomplish this through your own acquisitions, whether they're small acquisitions or as you grow bigger acquisitions. But if you can roll it all together where you have this profitability level, all of a sudden the public markets get to be more interested. And that's where the true uber wealth has always been made. It does come down to this exit strategies and being able to go from the owner-run business, we all started there, to the professionally run business, which is really required once you start buying multiple businesses, to hitting a level that either you want to sell out to private equity, because private equity is doing the exact same thing of bundling businesses together to ultimately be able to go public. So those are truly, here's your strategies and here's your opportunities if you want to make it all happen. Now we've talked about the why to start buying multiple businesses and rolling them up together. And really your goal setting of where do you want to ultimately be in your personal financial life. There's 1,000 ways to slice it. I mentioned, 3 different brands, Amazon, Yum, and frankly, myself. Let's talk about what the process of buying a business looks like. Even before we get to this point, which these are some of the legal documents and strategies to consider, you've got to find the opportunity. And that can literally just take picking up the phone and calling. I have a business associate that claims to be an investment banker, but the reality is he sends out approximately 50,000 personalized letters to different businesses, encouraging them, making offers to them to be able to get bought out. Now, this guy, he does raise capital for the acquisitions. He bundles them together and sells them to private equity. And frankly, his goal is to do 1 deal per year and make $1 million per year. This is the level and the opportunity that is possible with the right approach. But it does literally just take, get out there, talk to people, reach out, whether it's through LinkedIn, good old-fashioned direct mail, or cold calling. They all work. If you're cold calling, you need to get kind of the business owner data. There are data brokers. A bunch of them are out there. I've used Exact Data. One of the most well-known is Zoom Info. I don't think they're related to the video conference, but they are one of the largest. If you take the cold calling approach, great. Get the contact information, pick up the phone, and start dialing for dollars. And if you need some scripts or you need some education on that, There's some great mastermind resources and educational resources. Please just reach out to me at nate@investmentlawyers.com. I'm happy to make introductions. As I've mentioned multiple times, like, my goal is for you to be successful. And if I can connect you with the right education, with the right team members for you to hit your goals, that's my entire, plan for my own roll up. But let's talk about what the process looks like. It always starts with getting the buyers interested and excited. That initial reach out of, hey, do you want to sell your business? Here's generally how we're going to work it out. Now, as you go through the process, generally you start doing due diligence at this point. Now, you may have a letter of intent out there, or for some acquisitions, you may just kick right into the due diligence process. With due diligence, it actually means business to see if it's really worth what you're offering. If you do a letter of intent, letter of intents are non-binding. In general, those are pretty equation-based, meaning, hey, I'm going to pay you 3 times earnings, but I don't know really what your earnings are because I'm going to figure out through the due diligence. Ultimately, you will have a letter of intent that is very specific on, here are the terms that I will offer to you to acquire the business. Then all that comes together through a purchase agreement, and there is a closing strategy. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about due diligence. We are starting with this letter of intent. I was mentioning that it's non-binding. It's part of the sales story. How are you getting the potential seller excited about the prospect of being able to sell? And as you go through due diligence, here's also your opportunity to renegotiate, because while you're going through due diligence, you may find problems, issues, and concerns. You ask me, that doesn't mean an opportunity is not worth it to pursue, but it does mean that I'm not going to offer as much. So that's the type of thing to really think about as you're going through due diligence. Now, with due diligence, I'll use the example of this coaching program that I just acquired. I have a marketing advisor, a business advisor. Personally, I have my operator that's going to be involved with actually running the business, the accountant, and the professional within the industry itself. That's your team. Your business advisor may be speaking to you as a consultant. Last one, your lawyer. Of course, the most important. Your business advisor is advising you on what it looks like going forward. If you've decided on your best strategy for how you're going to roll up a business, how you're going to approach it, having somebody on your team advising and coaching along the way, it's just best business. Your marketing advisor, they should be digging into the seller's business and what strategies are they using to find their clients. Has it been successful? Are they overspending on marketing? Also, finding competitively, are there more benefits and good sides of the current business's marketing strategies that is scalable, or ways to add in different components to increase the marketing, increase the client and prospect flow, ultimately building the business itself. And one of the best things is when the marketing advisor says, they don't really do much. I have no clue how they're successful. Sounds like a problem. To me, it sounds like an opportunity, because that's how you improve the business. But you know what? It may not be worth what you initially proposed, because it's tough to really value things if there's problems. So you expect to offer less. It is part of the strategy of bringing the seller together where you get to the place of final deals. From the accounting, you always want your accountant to be looking at the bank statements, the financial statements, debts, as well as tax returns. They're the ones that are diving in to make sure that everything lines up. Does a tax return line up with the financial statements? Do the financial statements line up with the accounting ledger? And then ultimately, do the bank statements support everything else? The reality is if you find holes between those various different considerations, there's a problem. Dive in a little bit deeper. Why is there a problem and why is there a mismatch? Again, as I was explaining, that doesn't mean it's not a good acquisition to pursue. It just means that there's problems and you're not ultimately going to offer as much. Problems are your opportunities. Honestly, it truly is looking for the problems is exactly how I pursue a business opportunity. Now, this letter of intent, it always comes together, and one of the secrets of it is be as specific as humanly possible. This is that best and final offer. You may have letters of memorandum, basically the same thing. More loose terms to start with, but at the end of the day, there has to be an offer. And again, part of the reason to be so unbelievably specific on that offer is ultimately because I understand you want to save money on legal expenses. And as part of due diligence, just to mention, you have to have your attorney along. That attorney is going to look at leases, employment agreements, vendor agreements, credit agreements, all the various agreements that relate to what you're actually acquiring. They will also be the one that should be helping you with that letter of intent, because if it can be unbelievably specific, it will help with negotiations. Always have your attorney draft documents. Let's be honest, we all have templates that we start with. The opposing counsel, it can take longer to review and comment on other people's documents rather than just providing your own. And if your LOI is specific and the seller agrees to it, guess what? Wonderful. There's not a lot of things to negotiate. It's already been agreed. These are all the business terms. If the attorney starts to try to renegotiate, no, you go back to, hey, it's time to walk away if you're not actually pursuing the LOI that you agreed with. So you've done your due diligence. You have your best and final offer out. Next, we have that purchase agreement. That purchase agreement will be the true, legally binding agreement that's going to just lay it all out. Business terms you agree on in advance. Legal terms, miscellaneous terms, what jurisdiction are you going to be subject to law? Those can be negotiated with the attorneys unless you already have it decided in advance, again, being as detailed as possible with your letter of intent. Within the purchase agreement, there's generally exhibits. There's other agreements and information that all gets incorporated into this purchase agreement so that you're aware of what those are. One may be your assumption of contracts. 90% plus of the time, business acquisitions are asset purchases. That means the leases, the vendor agreements, the customer agreements don't automatically transfer to the new owner. You have to agree to and receive assignments of those contracts. And that also requires you as a buyer to go back to all of those persons and ask them for the assignment. or the approval. And they can say no. That will become part of the final closing issues to consider. But you do include what documents and agreements you're actually accepting the assignment of. Secondarily, we have a bill of sale. Bill of sale may include a deed if it's real estate. A bill of sale is generally for other personal and business and intangible and tangible assets of the business. This is your receipt, the official transfer document that is signed at the closing table. And the last document that is with almost every one of these transactions. The last document that is generally in all of these purchase agreements is a consulting agreement. Inevitably, there are things that have to happen by the seller after closing. If you don't have another agreement laying out exactly what they're expected to do, they can just sell, walk away, and be done with it. And that's a problem if you don't have all of the information, all of the guidance that you need to adequately and professionally take over the business and run it as necessary, but really based on, is there professional management in there, or are you expected to run it yourself? Regardless, you need to become the expert nonetheless. In terms of merger strategies, there's a few different ways to approach it. If your goal is ultimately to go public, there are ways to buy and acquire empty shells, or it's already registered as a public company. That's how you're jumping the gun from having these smaller businesses to having a public company. You still ultimately need to have the size to have the value. But as you're getting started and getting ramped up, that's what's called pink sheet companies. Basically shells and small companies that are later growing. Otherwise, you can take the ownership stake directly. Having your holding company that is slowly through process, just building and growing through the acquisition of other businesses. Now, when we talk about mergers, it actually is that bringing everything together, like that Yum brand or like Amazon, where you ultimately have all the ownership under one parent company with everything underneath it. In general, that parent company, we call it a holding company because it frankly doesn't do much other than hold the other businesses. And when you're pursuing the acquisition, you got to know that there's really three different components that come together for your acquisition or your merger. And that is, you can ask for cash or pay cash. You can seek financing from the SBA or otherwise to pay banks, get a loan, or ultimately carry back financing from the seller themselves. And the vast majority of these acquisitions have seller financing that goes right along with it. To use my own example, in the business that I just acquired, I came up with some cash down payment and I assumed the other debt that the business had. It's just the way that I decided to pursue it. If I didn't have the cash, I'd be raising capital from others to accomplish it. Fortunately, I was able to afford it, so that really worked out. In terms of the valuation, that's where your industry experience advisor or appraisers will be there to help. The industry advisor, he can let you know. You should ask, what are the general valuations within this particular industry? It can be different based on the various industries. Like I was saying, we have doctors' offices where everybody works in the business versus acquiring an assisted living center, which is both real estate and a business. Different ways to approach it, different valuations, but without having an industry pro to share, you're a little clueless other than trusting an appraiser. Certified appraisals can be unbelievably expensive. BPOs, broker price opinions, can be way off. But get your data, do your due diligence, figure out what the actual profitability and value of this opportunity is. Let's talk for a minute about where the money is coming from. Because you gotta have cash. Some sort of down payment is almost always required. Sellers aren't going to sign on the dotted line. They're not going to give up on their business unless they actually know that they're getting something out of this. And that's where having a securities offering, raising capital from investors is, if your piggy bank can't handle it, your first go-to solution. There's also bank financing. You can go to the SBA or other commercial banks. That will be honestly the cheapest source of capital. And if you can borrow enough money for the down payment, honestly, that's one of the most ideal situations that you can be in. Because again, cheapest capital. The safest capital is if your own piggy bank can actually handle it. The last component of the cash to close actually is seller financing. In the vast majority of these acquisitions, there is some level of seller carryback, meaning who is selling the business actually has an ongoing promissory note, potentially an interest in the company. But at the same time, you're continuing to pay them until they get their purchase price. 2020 acquired Crowdfunding Lawyers. And with that one, I think the whole thing was a seller carry. We offered in attractive terms, but it all went to the seller over a time frame. So different ways to structure it, different ways to strategize. As I was mentioning with the recent acquisition, I did a cash down payment that I could afford on my piggy bank and assumed the seller's other debts. It's a win-win all the way around. At the end of the day, you do need to be able to pay for your business, or let's be honest, why bother? We're all here to build our own empire, to be able to hand it off to our children, to be able to sell it to private equity or take it public. And as long as you're passionate, you know what you enjoy doing. Well, you know what? Stay in that area. Build your dream. And ultimately let it build your legacy. So I really appreciate y'all taking some time with me today. I know this is a little bit of a shorter live, but like I said, I'm just trying to survive the day. But if you do want more information about roll-ups, you do want to just chat, free consultations, go ahead and go to crowdfundinglawyers.net. You can just go ahead and sign up for a free consultation with myself and my other very quality attorneys. Or follow this QR code, and you'll also get a bunch of great information about if you are raising capital from investors, how to accomplish it efficiently, what kind of structures to use, and how you can make it all happen. So at the end of the day, thank y'all so much for showing up. And I'm hopefully been able to answer all of your questions just in chat since this is pre-recorded. But I thank you so much for joining, and hopefully you subscribe, like, and see you next week.